it up, it's your new groove, yeah. Riding waves in the digital blue, yeah. CDO Times got that insight, yeah. For the execs in the tech light, yeah. Bridging gaps with every tune, play it. Sync your mind to the tech boom, slay it.
Welcome to another episode of Bytes of Brilliance, where we dive deep with leaders who are driving innovation and shaping the future of business. I'm Carsten Krause, and today we're joined by someone with a rich track record in transforming brands, steering complex turnarounds, and defining product strategies that resonate globally. Our guest, John Ram, former CEO of Clarks, brings decades of experience in global brand management, e-commerce, and consumer product strategy. From his leadership at Hanes Brands to his impactful work at New Balance and most recently at Clarks, John has a unique understanding of how to leverage brand heritage while navigating the complexities of modern retail and consumer expectations. I recently had the opportunity to meet John in-person meeting at Blend Networking in Boston, where we discussed some fascinating topics, everything from the shift towards direct-to-consumer approaches and strategic brand pivots to the evolving role of AI in R&D and supply chain resilience. Today, we delve deep into the perspective on these pivotal challenges, explore his journey in brand and product leadership, and maybe even get a look at his vision for the future of consumer brands. John, welcome to the show. It's fantastic to have you here.
Thanks, Carsten. And needless to say, I appreciate that introduction. It's very nice. But as you know, and we talked about it when we first met, you're only successful because you surround yourself with people who are a lot smarter than you. And I've had an amazing career, and I've had the opportunity to work with unbelievable leaders and unbelievable peers and great organizations that allowed me to prosper and be successful. So thank you.
Thank you. No, I think that in itself shows your leadership, right? I think that's a leadership lesson right there. John, you led Clarks through a period of significant change where you had to balance tradition with the demands of a modern market. From your experience, what were some of the most challenging and rewarding aspects of that role?
Well, I think the first thing that you learn is you're working for a brand that is just about to turn 200 years old. And in the grand scheme of things, your time on that brand is so insignificant for all the work and all the heritage and all the successes and all the innovation that the brand has had over the years. So the first thing you do when you go in is you have this real sense of responsibility. It is overwhelming when you work for a brand that has been around for 200 years. And then you also come to terms with the fact that the brand is called Clarks, and there's a family name called Clarks. And that family has been involved with the business and continues to be involved with the business for 7 generations. So it's a huge, huge responsibility, and one that I didn't certainly take lightly. We had a lot of work to do. There were a lot of great innovations over the years, and there were changes that had an impact on the business. And walking into it, it was really about just settling things down, getting a perspective of the work streams that we really needed to focus on. I've always taken the approach that if you are customer and consumer centric and you work back from there, you have a tendency of being a lot more successful. It allows you to rate the priorities and then sequence those priorities within the organization. So it's there's still clearly, there's always work to be done, but it was an absolute amazing experience and quite the honor to served in that role.
Great. Now, I think that's a really great insight, looking at what you have, looking at the tradition and finding the right approach that matches the organization while getting ready for the new trends and changes in the market. It's ever changing. And I remember us discussing when we were at that Blend Boston networking event. We were talking about Nike. I actually wrote an article recently about some of the challenges, some of the things that the CEO did well, and some things that didn't go so well, right? And what there was one of the key aspects was that he's putting a big focus on technology, on direct-to-consumer strategies, but also at the same time shifting away from the traditional athlete focus, which was kind of the secret recipe, right? And eventually led to changes in their leadership, right? Watching that unfold, what lessons would you take from their approach, pros, when you look at it from a pros and cons perspective?
Well, first things first, there's tons of examples, right, of changes that take place within an organization. Sometimes changes happen too quickly. One of the things I think you've got to frame up is when you're in the product, apparel, and footwear space, whether it's fashion, leisure, sport, we've been an industry that has traditionally been very subjective. Something as simple as getting sell-through data from your customer is very complex. And I think as a result, there was a real push across our industry to move to more data-informed decision making. And I think that that's important. You've got to meld both the subjective and the objective to be successful. But every organization is different, and really trying to dissect the essence of what made the organization tick and take them on the adequate journey over time to be either more objective or to swing them back a little bit more subjective. That's the trick. And I'm sure many others who have either worked in a CEO capacity or other areas of the organization, struggled with that. Data is critical as you move forward. It allows you to understand what's happening a lot quicker and be able to respond and mitigate some challenges along the way. But you also have to respect the fact that those that are tied to the product design or the product management or the marketing of the brand, sometimes that internal intuition is really powerful as well. So finding that balance is what I think is important.
I think it's always about a balanced approach, isn't it? Right. Actually, I had a podcast with my peers and friend Brian Evergreen, and he blew my mind. He said, "Don't look at the data for innovation, right? If you look at the data, you might miss future vision, and you're too focused on current data, right?" I still also think, operations, is you got to look at the data. To your point, like you have to do it.
It helps inform decision making, right? But at the end of the day, if you're not looking around the corner constantly to see what it is your consumer may or may not be looking for, that can be problematic. But data does help shape an innovation strategy. If you're going in with a more informed framework in which to work, I'm sure many entrepreneurs would say the same thing, right? Entrepreneurship's not about chaos, right? It's about understanding what the potential opportunities are, honing in, focusing, and really driving towards that finish line. And ultimately, I think it's just so critical that it is that balance between both.
Right. Talking about looking around the corner, when you look at your approach using product and driving product marketing and brand management with the rise of AI and data, like you said, right? How have these tools influenced your approach to come up with new products and understand customers better?
Well, I think that the fundamentals have always been there, right? Marketing 101, understand your consumer, and then work around the 4 Ps to really develop a compelling story. Map your brand positioning if it's an existing brand, understand your competitive set, look for the white space. I think both data and AI have allowed you to accelerate, bring more precision to it. But once again, some of that information, if you're using historical data to decide on the future, that could sometimes be a problem. I heard a quote from I'm not taking credit for it, but I did tell this individual I was going to use it. He called it digital dysfunction. And what we were talking about was making decisions off of the foundation of really bad data. Data that you're taking for granted as gospel, where by, if you would think about how many organizations today still talk about 2019 as their base year, right? Well, we're not back to 2019. But if you look at between 2019 and where we are today and what happened in between,
Right.
if you don't think about how that's changed consumers' behaviors, you're using that data to make a decision going forward, it can be flawed. So I think just, again, really understanding what it is you're looking at. From an AI standpoint, I was sitting on another panel at Babson a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about the same thing with the students. And it's so early, right, in its place in terms of what we know about it and how it's going to impact us. It's hard to understand. Clearly, there's great potential, but there's also a fear factor. And one thing I've learned in my career is, I think you and I talked about it, Karsten, at the Blends event, is people react to change very differently. There are those that wake up in the morning, embrace change and are excited about change. And then there are those who at night, when they're trying to go to sleep, they're so anxious by what the next day is going to bring that they can't sleep. So understanding that entire spectrum, I think, is also important. And as leaders, I think it's important to be able to vocalize and communicate to an organization what your vision is of how you're going to use technology, so that those that are sitting in the audience can at least start to, I guess, reconcile. It gives you an opportunity to figure out how you're going to uptrain or upskill individuals within your organization.
With technology, there can be disruption, and we also discussed supply chain. I was a CIO for a third-party logistics provider before the supply chain disruption that we experienced, but still then at Boston Beer, similar disruptions that we experienced. So the supply chain can be disrupted, right? And how do we as leaders prepare for something like this, so that our products are not stuck in some containers on a shipyard, and you want to provide your customers your products, but the shelves are empty. So
I've never seen that happen before. I think that the key message there is, you have a plan A, you have a plan B, you have a plan C. And depending on the level of complexity, you might even have a plan D and a plan E. But the one thing you do have to understand is you have to recognize that something will inevitably go wrong. And managing expectations, communicating, having vendor partners that are as obsessed as you are at delighting your customer and consumer. I'm a big believer, and I was very fortunate to work with logistics providers who understood that and had a respect for it. And I'm not so sure that I not articulated what my number one priority was, which was delighting that customer and that consumer and making it as seamless as humanly possible for them to do what they needed to do. It would have resonated as strongly with those partners, but communication. You're dealing with people who you're being asked to perform miracles at times, and you're dealing with various vendor partners along the value chain that, boy, they've got a lot on their plate as well. So I guess at the end of the day, Karsten, isn't that what empathetic leadership is all about? It's understanding the pain points along the value stream and understanding workflows, and then recognizing that just because you might decide you're going to work 24/7 doesn't mean the vast majority of the population working on your business are going to be doing that. So plan for the unexpected, because it's inevitable.
Right. Yeah. I actually wrote an article on how you can leverage the cybersecurity mindset of risk mitigation, scenario planning, and how to manage risks overall, right? That is really important to have, like contingency plan, like you said, plan B, C, D, E, and react to the market while you're doing it, and using data to manage that. And the other thing, when you were talking, it was also something that I found throughout my career, that you have our end customers, the consumers, but ultimately everybody's our customer. You have internal customers, the employees that you're helping to delight customers, and then partners too. They're also ultimately customers, where you're trying to make it as easy and seamless for them to work with you. So some of that can be quite complex, right? These managing all of this complex transformation, maybe in ever-changing market conditions. So for other executives who are facing complex transformation and growth, what would you offer to guide them through these kinds of transitions?
First things first, yeah, I've been asked that question a lot by students that I engage with, by peers. At the end of the day, it really does start with your own self-awareness, right? Who you are, what you like to do, where you like to spend your time, the things that you'll try to avoid at all costs, sitting through a PowerPoint presentation that's 400 pages long. Those are the kinds of things that I think are really, really important, because what it does is it allows you to kind of surround yourself with people who are going to complement your skill set. I'm a firm believer in you don't necessarily need to ever be the smartest person in the room, but you need to be smart enough to understand where your shortcomings are and surround yourself with people who love to do the things that you might not necessarily like to do, but are really good at it, are really smart, and help you learn how to look at the situation or the problem a little bit differently. It's when you come up, you're all a product of our experiences, right, and our upbringing, and you can look through the lens of something, of a problem, of a situation. And I was really fortunate in my career to work with great people and interact with others in school and what have you, but to allow me to widen that aperture and look a little bit more upstream and downstream the problem and try to interpret it not just through the vertical that I grew up with or the vertical that I'm most comfortable with, but through different lenses. And I think when you do it that way, that's where you come up with those contingencies. That's where you come up with a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, a plan D, because inevitably something can go wrong along the value chain, right? You just don't know. But if you have enough understanding and you've got people who recognize that if you make a change upstream, you have to understand what the implications are going to be downstream. And that's of paramount importance.
That's a great leadership lesson. You've obviously held a lot of roles that were both strategic and operational across your career. And sometimes you have to balance like a long-time North Star vision with the daily demands of execution, especially during these high-stakes transformations. How do you balance that?
Well, first things first, you don't do it without people, right? And making sure stepping into a new environment, stepping into a new challenge, you've got to spend enough time and give yourself enough time to listen and learn, observe, engage, whether it's town halls, whether it's one-on-ones, whether it's sitting down with a group of cross-functional team members and having a coffee and just talking about the business. And when you start to talk about something like that, that's when you start to understand the different perspectives from the different functional areas. And it's amazing just what that interaction does. I would say to you that the other thing that's really important is once you've shaped that and you have an understanding of the people and some of the things, the way they think, the way they're approaching their business, it's sometimes you have to reframe the culture, right? And the culture is made up of people. So making sure that you understand that and what you're reframing and give them, to your point, that North Star to focus on. And then I'm sure you've seen it many, many times in your career. I know I have. It is so important, regardless of whether you're a COO, a CEO, a CIO, whatever your role is. There's a time for vision and strategy, right? Those are really, really, really important. But learning and understanding how you're going to operationalize it and execute it is really that end to end. And I mean, we've seen it, and there's countless examples of it where somebody comes in to a new leadership role and has amazing vision and has amazing strategy, but the organization just doesn't have the resources or the capabilities at that point in time to operationalize it and execute it. The biggest problem we all have, right, is everything needs to be done yesterday. Mm-hmm. So unless you understand the timeline in which you're working in, that can be problematic, and people fail as a result of that. And I've always tried to take the approach that I want to be a good visionary. I want to be good at articulating where we're going to the organization. I want to be strategic. But I also want to recognize that strategy needs to happen, and it happens through operationalizing that strategy and then ensuring that you have an amazing team that's going to execute against it. So to me, it's all about, again, it gets back to the balance.
No, while you were talking, I was also thinking that, especially in your career, I'm sure, some of the things that you mentioned, it's the situational awareness and emotional IQ is so important. Like if you go into a company where your task is to turn it around, you probably have a different approach versus if you have like rapidly growing company where you just need to add fuel to the fire so you can continue to grow fast, or crisis management situation. We all were semi unprepared for a pandemic, and how you then use that scenario planning mindset. So I think that's something that is quite key. Is there any other insights for that you're coming to mind from?
Karsten, one of the things I constantly repeat, I've got two children, one that's 20 and is in university, and the other one that just graduated and will be continuing on to postgraduate degrees. The experience, it's an amazing thing, right? And it comes over time, and it comes over different situations and different contexts, right? To know what's going to happen tomorrow, to know what you're going to be facing. And that again, as for some, it's really exciting. For others, it's daunting, but it's inevitable, right? Change is inevitable. So making sure that you take the moment to really distill out the experiences you've had in your career, look for patterns, look for similarity. But to me, the most important thing is never discount experience, never discount institutional knowledge. In today's society, right, we tend to discount everything, right? There's a bad situation, even in growth, right? Whether it's turnaround, transformation, or growth. How many times have you witnessed, individuals come into an organization and say, well, let's turn it upside down? That's probably not the best approach. You really, truly have to take the time to understand. And the way you do that is by engaging with the people you work with your vendor partners, gaining insights through different perspectives, through different individuals or functional areas, again, across the value chain. But I just am a firm believer that experience counts.
Absolutely. So talking about experience, right? And experience means that you're learning, right? Sometimes you learn. I personally have to admit I've learned most from my mistakes and things that I took an inventory after what happened and then changed my approach and learned from it. So I know that you're a strong advocate for lifelong learning. We were talking about that the other day. So what advice would you give to new leaders as they start their journey?
Well, I think I shared this with you, and I'm gonna share it again. I'm unbelievably fortunate. I had a mom that taught in university, and she taught teachers how to teach children with learning disabilities.
Mhm.
And my mom had a real disdain for that word disability because it was a label. With that label came negative connotations. And what she just always tried to, I guess, espouse to both myself and my sister is that everybody learns differently, right? We're all different. Our backgrounds are different. Our experiences are different. And sometimes you just have to try different paths to get that right connection. And that has stuck with me from day one. And you get to see it not as a teacher like my mom was teaching, again, teachers who were going to be teaching children, but I got a chance to see it as coaching youth hockey. It never ceases to amaze me. You get on the ice with these young kids and you drop a puck and they all go chasing after the puck. Just like if it's on a soccer pitch, right? The ball goes out and then everybody go chases it.
Right.
And then you see at the end of a season, you step on the ice or you step on the pitch, you throw the puck down, and instead of chasing after it, the athletes look at you and say, what do you want us to do, coach? What's the plan? What's the drill we're going to run? So to me, that is really, really important for new leaders, any leader within any organization. You have one person reporting to you or two people, Take the time to understand, because it's going to be so fruitful if you do it. And I would say to you, I've made tons of mistakes throughout my career. And I've been so fortunate to have people that I reported to that just didn't sit there and say, you know what, you made a mistake, discount them. They took the time to be very upfront with me and to tell me what they thought, what I did well, what I didn't do well, what I could learn from the experience. And it's hard, right? You put yourself out there, it is hard. But I would say, I think for a leader, I think for society at large, if we were all able to do that with a little bit more comfort and conviction, I think we'd all be in a lot better place.
Absolutely. You always have to think, when I think of hockey, I always have to think of Wayne Gretzky's famous quote that you have to go where the puck is, skate where the puck is going, not where it is, right?
Yeah.
A good way to put it. A lot of ice hockey knowledge and leadership. So I think what we like to do in this podcast is to do at the end, towards the end, we do a quick fire round of questions where we just get some sound bites, and it's usually a lot of fun. So are you ready for that?
I'm ready.
Okay,
I'm
great.
excited.
One book every leader should read.
Well, I will tell you, a 90-day plan book. If you're starting a new role, I've gone through that, and I would say to you, don't forget. It's so easy to jump in. Make sure you have a plan. And there's so much great material out there. It's not rocket science, but it's really helping you build a framework for the things that you want to accomplish in your first 90 or 100 days. I would say, to me, that's something that I would, again, remind everybody, because you step into a new role and inevitably you're going to be drinking from a fire hose. But if you can come home every day and just look at it and say, these were the things I wanted to do, get this done, I've got to reprioritize, but that's really helpful.
Yes, that makes sense. What's the favorite brand campaign you've worked on?
Wow. So I would say to you, it's a great question, first off. The one that I would say I didn't work on, I was a part of, and I had execution involved in it, was something that I worked at, that I was a part of at the NBA, which is, I love this game. And it was so simple, but it just resonated globally and universally. And it stuck with me as something that, if you find that those 3 or 4 words and you build emotion against those words and you use the assets that are available to you, it's absolutely amazing. So that would certainly be one of them, but there are so many, I couldn't list them all. And if I do it, I'm going to leave somebody out and they won't like me.
Of course. So when you look at AI in product development, is it a game changer or overhyped?
Well, it's funny you say that, because in my last role, I downloaded an app and I started to take that app and become a designer using that app. And I found myself kind of running out from my office, going to see some of the designers and showing them, they were looking at me and like, yeah, that's pretty neat, but could you let us do our jobs? And so I stopped doing that. But when you think about putting something as powerful as that in the hands of a designer, allowing them to accelerate the design process, and then take those design concepts, send them through a 3D printer, right? And be able to tweak things. You just think about the time that saves. Right? The concept to consumer, depending on the industry that you're in, can be 18 months, 24 months. And we're operating in a fast-paced environment, and the consumer expects us to be faster. So it's going to be interesting to see how different industries that have very long lead times use it. And it's also going to be interesting in the industries that I've been in, where they have been long and there's lots of waste in building prototypes. And the faster you can do this, the more productive you can be through using this type of technology. I think it's going to be interesting. I think the key is going to be, though, KPIs are probably going to have to change, which, again, if you don't measure it, you don't know. So figuring out how you're going to measure it, I think, is going to be a big part of the behavioral change as well.
That's super interesting that you would be using 3D printing. I was also thinking like there's a lot of companies that are using digital twin technology before they even build something. They can already simulate how
Yep.
things work. Like at Boston Beer, we're able to, or looking at simulating how we extend our production lines with digital twin technology, and then augmented reality. I've seen some companies doing that too, where everybody walking around with their goggles and looking at the real thing,
Absolutely.
looking at it, right?
Absolutely.
There's a lot of opportunity, and even I recently was doing some of that work where it was developing some applications and websites and capabilities that I would probably then hand over to a full stack developer, but I'm able to basically set up the core of the website of the app all by myself, which is amazing, right?
Yeah, well, Kirsten, just think about it in context of you get product, right? How many people in organizations have analysts, right? And those analysts were hired to look at data, to understand the data, about the implications of the data, and how it could help shape strategy, right? Now, in a lot of organizations that I've been a part of, those analysts and that role has primarily been building reports, right? In a lot of cases, building reports in Excel, right? And not necessarily having a chance. And those reports and those builds sometimes take long, long time. By the time the report's done, the information is no good anyway. It's of no value, right? But think about an analyst, somebody who's got a very analytical mind, and think about how they would be interacting with an AI application and how powerful that can be.
That's an amazing insight. If you had to choose direct to consumer or partner driven.
When you say partner driven, you mean?
Yeah, when I thought about that question, I was thinking about Nike, but
both, inevitably both. And that's not a cop out. That's a reality. Early on in nascent e-commerce, everybody thought that, we don't need stores anymore. But didn't we learn even through the COVID experience, right? We're human beings. We love experiences. So there are various types of products that, yes, you want to go out and experience it. You want to see what it's like. You want to touch, you want to feel. You want to walk into a shoe store and smell the leather. Did you order a pair of shoes online? 100%.
Right.
But I do think it's understanding your core consumer, understanding your consumer's preference for their purchase journey. But at the end of the day, I think it's both.
Right. I think it also is sometimes different from generation to generation. I've looked at some comparisons where you have like Gen X shop and buy in a certain way, then you have millennials and Gen Z where it's more like a live streaming and talking to friends and, hey, look at what I'm buying, and then they buy together or whatever.
Well, I'm going to age myself. I'm going to age myself now by saying earlier on in my career, I was working in the banking sector. And one of the things that we had to do within the banks was educate consumers on how to use an ATM card. Because we didn't want them coming into the bank, into the branch to make deposits that can easily be done through an ATM machine or to withdraw money. Something as basic as that. Right. And look how far we've come.
Exactly. All right. Last question. What's the best business advice you have ever received?
Use your ears and use your eyes more than using your mouth.
That's it. Right to the point. All right, John. I think that kind of concludes us. Thank you for sharing your journey with us and the challenges of restructuring heritage brand like Clark's to your unique insights on brand strategy, supply chain, and innovation. I think hearing your perspective on maintaining brand integrity while evolving with the market is invaluable for our listeners, especially for those that are leading their own transformation or just getting started, right? So any last concluding thoughts from your perspective? How can people get in touch with you?
Sure. Happy for anybody to get in touch with me. Probably the easiest vehicle is LinkedIn. I'm usually obsessive compulsive on that, whereby somebody sends me a note, I do my absolute best to almost immediately respond to them. So, and I think I've mentioned this to you, Karsten, I'm notorious for not being a very good sleeper. So I need something to do. So happy to be responding to people on LinkedIn at all hours of the night.
Nice. All right, John, it's been a pleasure and inspiration having you on the show. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All the best.
Duh.